Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us again for another episode of SEO Fight Club. I'm just saying hello in the YouTube chat. So if you are on YouTube and you're watching this, note that we're looking there for questions. And today's a great day for questions. So if you have any, feel free to ask. Otherwise, we're just going to hop around from SEO topic to SEO topic. So yeah, go ahead and ask questions at any time. The first thing I want to talk about is SEO this week. So Clint, what's the likelihood of that coming back soon?
Still plugging away on SOPs and stuff and fixing a massive franchise website. So it's going to be probably a couple of weeks still.
All right, couple weeks. So we'll keep pinging Clint because I know people want it to come back. We like it, so we're gonna nag you about it. Carolyn, what's new on the podcast front?
Well, I'm going to have a special guest.
Oh, who might that be?
You.
I hear it's someone very dashing.
Yeah, it'll be a different approach. It's not really an interview, but I just want to do my part and get the word out on the potential for some site fun when Google takes away the URL parameter tool.
Very cool. Well, I'll be sure to check out that episode.
I bet you will.
And so, yeah, if you're looking for some more SEO content to consume, check that out. It's Confessions of an SEO. You can search it in Google by name. It'll rank #1. It's on every single podcast platform. So if you have a favorite, search for it there, you'll find it. And she's taking sponsors to help fund her content. So for the cost of a cup of coffee per month, you can help all of her projects. This also helps her indexing project too, right?
Yes, it does.
You want to give us a link for that sponsorship and let us know what it costs?
If you Google Confessions of an SEO Sponsor, it'll be in a link in one of those results. And it's, you can do it for $4.99 a month.
There you go.
Yeah.
Cost of a cup of coffee. Very cool. So with that, we'll move on to our episode. And the first thing I want to talk about is WebSockets. So Search Engine Roundtable just recently had an article about WebSockets and Google announcing or declaring that they don't support them. And that's a remarkable announcement to me because it's so specific. So the first thing that happens is somebody asks, a Google insider, hey, does Googlebot crawl WebSockets? And they just respond, no, Googlebot doesn't. It's wow, why can't we get such clear answers like that in SEO? The reason it's a crazy answer is what kind of website needs Googlebot to crawl for content in WebSockets? So WebSockets are kind of like a network connection, a direct network connection for sending messages back and forth without a lot of latency. So if you think about the web and the way browsers work, you type in a URL or click a link and the web browser says, okay, I'm going to establish a network connection with the web server. Then once that connection is established, I'm going to say, hey, web server, please send me this document. And then that web server is going to say, okay, here's that document. Once I have it, I'm going to close that network connection. And then I'm going to process that document in my browser. So it becomes this this whole handshake for every page, every interaction on a website. Establish connection. Hello, are you there? Yes, I'm there. I'd like this document. I have that document. Here's that document. Okay, goodbye, close connection. And then the next time you click a link, you go through all of that handshake. And it's so much protocol that it actually slows things down. So WebSocket is a lot more efficient. It says, hey, browser, I'm going to do a lot of requests. So open up the network connection once. And I'm going to say, give me document A. Okay, now do document B. Okay, now do document C. And I'm going to reuse that connection a ton of times without having to open and close it on every single transaction. And because of that, it's very efficient. And its primary use, its primary reason for being is like chat apps and conferencing and web-based video gaming and things where you wouldn't want to establish and drop connection on every single action. And so that's why it exists. And so why would somebody need Googlebot to go into a chat app and look for content? Why would Googlebot need somebody to go into a network video game and look for content? You know, it's such a weird request that this person would ask, hey, why is it that, you know, does Googlebot support WebSockets? It's such a bizarre request. That should have been like a trigger for Google. They should have said, oh, what kind of website is that needs that? Is it a travel site? You know, it's so weird. But they just fired back. They're like, no, Googlebot doesn't support it, which means, holy cow, there is a whole new category of cloaking. You can now use, like, if you're a web developer and you've been trained to develop WebSockets, you can now do the hello world WebSockets 101, probably 3 lines of code, you know, example of WebSockets working that says to a page, replace the main content with this spammy offer. And so if you create a simple HTML web page that has your SEO text in that simple context, it'll rank for the SEO text. When Google processes it, they don't do the WebSocket, so they won't get the WebSocket interaction that says replace the main content with the offer. And so they're going to rank a page in search, but then the page is going to show human beings the offer. You're now cloaking with WebSockets. And so now there's this whole new thing that Google's blind to because they will not run that WebSocket code. All right. Now it gets even more interesting because we're delving into the black hat arena on what black hats are going to do with this intel. So the black hats are then going to realize, holy cow, I'm in a JavaScript context because WebSockets are coded in JavaScript. All right. So they can do their SEO text in a simple rendering context, but they're doing their cloaking within the JavaScript. It's very interesting because since they're there, they could commit to JavaScript rendering and they can put their SEO text into JavaScript services as well. So now all their web page is a JavaScript include that calls a web service and puts content on the page. So when somebody views source, they see no keyword content in the source, nothing to analyze for SEO. They look into the JavaScript and all they see is a web service call that's probably looking up content based on IP. And it might not even show you the right content unless you're a Google IP. Those are published. So now at this point, if you're a web developer or less, you've hit the end of your road to be able to research the SEO of the page. The SEO of the page is officially hidden from public view. You have to be someone at Google to see it. And so now you also have this web socket that Google can't see. And so the security implications of that are remarkable. It affects phishing attacks. It affects Google's ability to detect hacked web pages. It affects malware. It affects so many things, illegal content. It affects all of these things. And if Googlebot has no visibility into WebSockets, then Safe Search probably has no visibility into WebSockets either. It's a fundamental, we're talking about WebSockets 101 coding here. And if Google is totally blind to it, if search is totally blind to it, there is a lot of touch points where that causes problems. And so it's amazing, you know, because we play this constant cat and mouse game just on whether or not relevancy factors exist in SEO. And Google will run us in circles and pit us against each other. And then on something like this, they just come out and blurt it. You know, it kills me. You know, why can't they be honest with us? Because we're not even doing anything bad or malicious, but they can be honest and open with, you know, the worst of the worst. And, you know, it's just so crazy because, you know, I feel like they scrape their boots on us and then they go and do stuff like this and they're super friendly and helpful for this avenue, but they can't help us, you know, make a more relevant page. You know, they can't help a small business survive the pandemic, but they can share this without even thinking. So yeah, I don't know. What do you think, Lee?
I think it's interesting that, like you said, that they came out and just directly said this, you know, no thought or, you know, no processing of the implications of that. It almost feels like a strategic error.
Yeah.
But then the other side of it is, you know, is it actually true, or is it an invitation for black hatters to, you know, show yourself?
Well, I think it puts the fact that they answered that publicly, I think it puts them in the hot seat. It puts them in the hot seat two ways. You know, I think now they need a solution. So they either need to make it so that they look at that content so they can scan it, or they need to have a rule that if they detect WebSockets in play, that they don't index it. It's a page that's meant to be interacted with, not indexed.
How expensive is that processing? I mean, one of the things that, you know, you've been vocal about over the years is, you know, a lot of the stuff that technically Google might have the capability to is, from a processing standpoint, too expensive to implement over the trillions of pages that exist. So is this, if they had to go down that avenue and look at sockets, is that an expensive?
Well, how safe is their safe search if a WebSocket can put adult content on the screen and Google can't detect it? I mean, how safe is the safe search if a WebSocket could throw ransomware malware at people and Google can't detect that? And it's one of those things where, you know, if the scripts that are hacking websites to make backlinks draw the backlinks using a WebSocket interaction, Google's never gonna see it. Well, they won't index backlinks that way, but they would present them to users. So it makes more sense on the malware side. If the hacked web pages were spreading malware or spam or things of that nature, then that malware and spam would be undetectable to Googlebot, and probably safe search, because this is a fundamental capability. And if they don't have the fundamental capability, that's kind of frightening. So they've fallen behind the technology that they've developed.
And they announced it.
And so, yeah, it's just remarkable. I think what they should have done is ask that's an interesting question. What type of website is that? Because it would have put the person on the hot spot to explain why Googlebot needs to crawl WebSockets. And that would be a difficult thing to answer. There's only one answer I can think of for that, and that is, I'm trying to build a new JavaScript framework that is a lot more efficient than existing JavaScript frameworks. Other than that answer, there's probably no good answer to the question. What do you think, Clint? You know more about Black Hat than most.
I'm looking at it and I don't see like the average SEO taking advantage of this in any way. So
no. It's
it's
more
just
the
like you
average
said.
hacker.
I think it's just like you said, it's going to be a black hat thing that eventually is. My guess is Google will step that back and actually start looking for it more. Or maybe it was almost an invitation, like, go ahead and do it so we can find it and then clean out our index of all the black hat sites. Here's an easy thing that we can, change and detect that you're using those things. So I don't know. There's plenty of implications for it. I was looking at the HTML documentation of implementing it. It's not something that is easy and it won't take some time. So
yeah, it takes a particular caliber of web developer. Even an average web developer probably doesn't work with WebSockets.
yeah.
So it is a very proprietary niche of development skill, but it's not unknowable. Like, there are YouTube videos that teach you how to do this in like 30 minutes. No, not the black hat hacking, but the fundamentals of a WebSocket.
Yeah, it's interesting.
Yeah, I find it interesting because I like to keep track of all of the various ways that cloaking can work. And this is a new one on my list, cloaking via WebSocket.
And that's all strictly for research, right, Ted? You're a white hat.
It actually is.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've reported on cloaking before, and I don't mind if Google knows about it. It's probably best that they do, because the main reason is it results when it's unhindered, when it's unscannable, it results in your grandparents getting their computers ransomed for Bitcoins. And so, I want antivirus to work. I want safe search to work. If you care about your family, you don't want them to go through that. If you care about your business, you don't want to go through that. So at a fundamental level, we want a decent society to live in. So yeah. I report on cloaking, and it's fascinating because there is actual work you can do with cloaking that isn't malicious. There are things you can do with, we have a 4-day shipping promotion, and I want to be able to communicate it to my audience effectively, and I can't get Google to update faster than Google's going to update. And so there are ways that you can You can use cloaking in order to do effective marketing communications. It's highly technical SEO. It's using what is typically a black hat concept for white hat purposes. There are legitimate reasons to cloak. There are feature capabilities that are built on cloaking. So for example, your JavaScript menu will hide the menu content while you're not hovering it. That's as intended. That is a form of white hat cloaking. Accordions, tab containers, mobile development in general largely uses cloaking for a lot of white hat reasons. So it's not all black hat. These are fundamental capabilities. But the thing about those things is Google can scan those. Safe Search can scan those. Antivirus software can scan those. And that's the difference when Google starts announcing its blind spots. Oh, we have no visibility as to what happens once the WebSocket is engaged. That's a different thing. That's a part of JavaScript rendering that Googlebot can't do and is blind to, but will run on the user's computer. So there's stuff that will run on your computer that Google's ability to scan can't look into. Yeah.
Man, you are the blackest white hat I know. Your mind goes right to those use cases, and I'm like,
I wear a lot of hats. I'm a small business owner. I'm an engineer. I'm an inventor. I'm a marketer. I'm a custodian. I'm a tinkerer. So I see things from a lot of different angles. I see things from more angles than most people see things. And so when I see an announcement like that, I probably see it different than even the people who made it. So it was probably a mistake. It was them trying to be honest. It wasn't them trying to be mean, but it just, it gets me that, they tiptoe around such benign things like, keyword density, something that isn't harming anybody. And then they'll be completely open about something that probably has no application other than ransoming people's computers. It just gets me sometimes. I get mad about it. Not like really mad, but why can't they be nicer to SEOs? Or at least be as honest with us as they are with the really evil black hats.
So Terry Power dropped the comment. So no one needs a dark website, a dark web to sell illegal stuff anymore.
Well, the thing about the dark web is that it's harder to trace is the thing. So this is still very easy to trace as to it. This website goes to this server, which is paid for by this credit card and this person. So it's not something that's untraceable. So it's not a great way to do crime, but the people who are hacking servers, they don't care about the tracing typically. So, all right, so that's that topic. I've exhausted that topic. So it's definitely interesting. I see Clint probably reading there. So any other topics you guys want to discuss, or should I go to the magic hat? All right, the magic hat. So Lee, you just finished up your training course.
Mm-hmm.
And I completely face planted. I was in that training course and I was going to rank a website using it, and I completely face planted this time around. And I ended up misconfiguring the web server, and it took like 2 months to undo my horrible mistake. And but now that the course is completely over, I just jumped up 50 spots in the rankings using your method. What do you want to share about your course?
Well, I think the thing that I've done now is I reached out to people that have been past participants to pull up their case studies, and that's now on the website testedseotraining.com. And it's pretty neat to see what's being done, because there's only so much that I can test personally, but the methods have been effective across all different sorts of keywords, all different sorts of niches, on multiple continents as well. So it's very, very robust and predictable in the results that it gets. So that's been kind of fun to see. Is, I haven't found use cases yet where it hasn't been effective. So it's harder in some niches than others to move up. Some niches, 10 spot move up is just incredible, and others, you can jump 80 positions overnight. But that's been the cool thing to see, having gone through it.
Now, the kind of hilarious part of your course is that it's not for everybody. Do you want to mention who it's not for?
Newbies. There's a couple of things that I look for. One is, because it's not inexpensive, if you're somebody that is making money with SEO, you'll get an ROI back from it very, very quickly. But if you're stuck and you're, making $1,000 a month or something along those lines, then you're probably not ready for it in a lot of different ways. And the other is people who are open to, I tell people off the bat, don't believe a word that I'm going to tell you. Go try it on, your test sites or your real sites, and, let the results be what you argue with. Don't argue with me just on theory or because of some preconceptions that you hold. So you have to be open to trying the techniques. But for those that have done it, it works very well.
Nice. And if people wanted to research more, where can they go?
testedseotraining.com. What you'll have to do is, if you like what you see there and you think it's applicable to you, just reach out. We'll have a conversation and see if we're right for each other. It'll be that first date, if you will.
Nice. We have a request for a topic on expired domains, and I think that's a great topic. One of the things that a lot of SEOs think is a factor is the domain name age. And so they look at the whois create date, and the older that is, the more valuable it is. And I personally do not believe that is a valuable factor. The reason I don't believe domain age is a valuable factor is, when I was in e-com, I had at my disposal hundreds of domain names that were, exact match domain names that were registered in the 90s. And so I would experiment with these domain names that had create dates all the way back into the 90s, and they performed no better than a brand new domain name that the world has never used. The thing that did make a difference were the cases where the domain was used in a website in Google search since the 90s. Those things worked amazingly well. So it's not the age of the domain name, it's how long has it been in search. So a far better metric than the whois create date is going to be the Wayback Machine, and looking at what the website looked at and how long ago. That's going to be a lot more useful information. You can see if it was used for spammy purposes. Were they pirating software? Does it potentially have a DMCA takedown and it's scorched earth to Google? I see Carolyn giggling there. And that's the other thing is you need to be able to diagnose whether or not an expired domain is going to work, or has it been penalized into the ground and you're wasting a lot of money, because people will auction off scorched earth. That's a common scam. They get a high value domain, punished into oblivion, and then they sell it for a premium. And I hate seeing that happen. So you should be able to see if it currently ranks. You should see how it was used in the past. Another problem with expired domains, like a lot of people like to get them and point them at their website and pick up all of the redirected backlinks from the domain, which is a tactic that can work, but it has to be done properly. Typically, when you point a domain at a homepage, Google perceives it as a soft 404 and it does nothing. So you probably want to redirect that on a URL by URL basis, or at least to an inner page. And the problem with that, there is some legal liability in some cases where if you take a trademark business, like a business, a phone company goes bankrupt, and you're like, woohoo, I'm going to swoop in and get their domain, you can usually expect to hear from a lawyer, because those trademarks are owned and you do not have a right to use them. And they're probably going to be sold to recoup losses for shareholders and vendors and other things. So you stand very little chance of hanging on to some of those and getting into legal headaches if you misuse them. So, you probably want to be cautious in the expired domain market. What do you think, Clint?
Yeah, I'd like more context from the person asking the question, though. Like, what specifically do you want to know about expired domains? It's the way, to me, the way the question was asked is, you might as well ask, let's talk about trees. I mean,
true.
They're green sometimes. Sometimes they turn brown. I don't know. I don't know what to, like, specifically, what do you want to know?
Yeah, that's why I dumped my 101 primer on it.
Actually, I had a question that was given to me this morning, which I thought was interesting. It had to do with how Google treats canonicals. So let's say you have page C that canonicalizes to page B and B canonicalizes to page A. Any benefits or issues with that structure?
Well, it's a suggestion. Google has its own decision tree for picking a winner. So the thing to keep in mind is you don't get to choose what Google picks, but you do get to influence the pick. So you'd probably want to sculpt it in a way that, gives you some kind of advantage in selecting what page ends up being canonical. And usually that means the simpler the setup, the better it'll tend to work, at scale. If you have thousands of pages doing this, you probably don't want infinite loops and circles and weird geometries that complicate the matter for Google. You're probably overthinking the problem at that point. The place where it gets sticky is, how do you handle search and faceted navigation and pagination? Do you canonicalize page 3 of the sterling silver jewelry category to page 1? What about lazy load scenarios? But usually people overthink it. And the general answer for ecom is page 3 of your pagination should probably canonicalize to page 3 of your category pagination. What do you think, Clint?
I think you really overthought that. I would think more. I'm thinking more like I'm doing this intentionally. Like in your case, that would be I did that accidentally. But I'm thinking intentionally. So what if I created that stack and I sent all the backlinks only to C? Would that pass up and rank A? And I think that'd be an awesome test. I say go for it. I've tried the B to A and that works. So adding one more layer to it, I'd try it.
That's what I encourage.
Especially would be really cool if C was on another domain. So you had B and A on one domain and C was on another domain. Send the links to C. Would that pass through all the way to A on that other domain? And if you could pull that off, I mean, you could hide entire link profiles doing that.
Yeah, that's a very good point. I was responding to the concept of indexing and cannibalization.
Yeah.
But for passing link juice and ranking, that's a completely different use case, and Clint is right on that.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, and Ted's right in so much as if you screw up your technical and you set up a site like that, you're probably doing it wrong and you need to correct that. But then looking on the other side, like how would I leverage that if it worked? That would be really awesome.
Yeah, I think that was the the individual that was talking about that was thinking about those and how would they and I encouraged them to set up a test and just try it and see what happened. I said, what happens when I do this sort of geometry or these sort of things and just see how Google treats it, see if there is advantage to be gained.
I mean, and there's 3 ways you could do it: is set them all up on the same domain, set C up on a different domain, set C and B and A all completely on 3 different domains, and then see what happens in all 3 of those stacks.
Mhm.
And assuming it worked, I mean, you could hide complete link profile doing that.
Here's a cool question. How important is breadcrumb navigation for e-com? How would you handle breadcrumbs for products that live in multiple categories? Here's my philosophy in e-com. All the various types of widgets that are on a page, best sellers, trending now, similar products, related posts, breadcrumbs, all of those things, they're typically little plugins or widgets on your platform or blog or CMS. And you can put them around different places and you can make different rules that govern what links appear in those things. Those things are they're internal link widgets. They're cross-linking your pages and they're vital. And oftentimes they're how you get page rank from your homepage trunk to your leaf node pages effectively, because you can't link to everything from the homepage. So I'm a big fan of all of those kinds of widgets in ecom. And the other thing is it's also great for CRO. So you have somebody come into a unicorn coffee mug on your store. And so you have a carousel of best-selling coffee mugs. You have a carousel of other, format unicorn coffee mugs. You have another carousel of other unicorn themed products. You have, you start to see how, if that one product isn't exactly the thing that a visitor wants to buy, you now have opportunities to channel them to what they are interested in, whether it's other coffee mugs or other unicorn themed goods. And so all of those types of widgets, they really help an e-com store a lot, and more is typically better. And if you go to Amazon, you'll see it on their pages. They're going to have a lot of different carousel widgets. What do you think, Lee?
Not my area of expertise, so I will just be a dissenting opinion just to be the dissenting opinion.
Fair enough. Fair enough. Any thoughts on that, Clint?
No, I think I'm right along with what you have said.
Right on. Let's see. let's see, downside of ranking websites using only content on page SEO and no backlinks. The downside I encounter when I only do on page is I frequently find myself getting to like number 23 and then like on page stops working. Like it's like a common brick wall I hit. And usually when everything I try to do on page has no effect, that usually signals to me that there's an off-page side of the story I'm neglecting. And usually that off-page side of the story is like referring domains, and like a single press release breaks me through that barrier and I can continue my journey of improving rankings. So the downside is if you neglect it for some keywords, you're only going to get so far. What do you think, Clint?
Yeah, I've always taught that you should always optimize on the page until you don't go any higher. Then do your internal linking until you don't go any higher. Then do your schema until you don't go any higher. And now you're playing in backlinks land. After and that process is usually worked pretty well for me.
Wow, that was a nugget drop. Like I got chills listening to that process. So he's probably never going to repeat that one again. So I hope you heard it.
Yeah.
What do you think, Lee?
Well, Carol and I'd love to generously call it. We ran a series of tests. It was just basically us being stubborn. We had a series of websites that we're trying to rank just with the content. And so for a period of about 6 months, we were yelling back and forth at each other. All right, tune it harder, tune it harder, tune it harder. And we would get up invariably to, page 3, page 2, and, couldn't move it up. And then we went and built, 1 or 2 backlinks and shot up onto page 1. It was like there's almost a filter in place that says, if you were that damn good, you'd have at least 1 backlink. Sort of a situation. And it's not always that 1 backlink is the cure for, it depends on the niche, but we couldn't do it. We kept tuning just over and over and over again and ratcheting it up using every on-page trick we could think of. Couldn't break through onto page 1 till we added a couple of links. And they weren't particularly good links. It wasn't like, we went out and got some magical high domain authority, powerful thing. It was just, a blog comment or a this or that type of a link. And then there it was. So that's been, my experience with that is you're going to have a little off-page game at a minimum.
Yep. Yeah, totally agree. All right, we got another question. How large are those search terms that you're going for without backlinks? I typically go for a reasonable e-com keyword when I go for something. So it's usually not the highest competition page, but it has real search traffic and value. So, it might be a keyword like sterling silver bracelet or amethyst pendant. It's typically 2 or 3 word search terms with very targeted, valuable traffic. So those are typically the kinds of keywords that I will, on average, be going after. But it's not payday loans. So yeah. And, people often bring up, well, if you're so good at SEO, why don't you rank for payday loans? Well, because I haven't been investing in link building on one keyword for the past 15 years. That's not something that you compete with a 3-month SEO package. If you want to invest in competing with 15 years of other websites link building, you need to invest in that. And there are things you can do on the scale of 2 to 3 years to break into those types of markets, but usually that's pretty expensive and aggressive SEO, and not many people are up for that. What do you think, Clint?
In payday loans, I wouldn't charge any less than $50,000 a month to try to rank for that. And I let them know that you're looking at a 2-year expense to do it. This is not that is not an easy niche at all. And so anyone who would say, oh, you're not a good SEO if you don't rank for payday loans, I challenge you to go out and do it. And then let us know your expenses and tell us how badass of an SEO you are, because I'll totally acknowledge it. But my guess is you're just going to disappear and then start ranking for best giant bubbles or some craziness for your little gay affiliate program versus actually providing any information to anybody. So it's.
Have you tried to rank
Those
in the
kind of
bubbles?
people just trigger me. I'm like, just shut up, go away. I mean,
Now, in defense of this commenter, he did not bring up payday loans. I introduced that into the debate.
it's all your fault, Pete.
Yeah, it's all my fault.
Also, like, just Clint, have you tried to rank in the bubbles niche? Man, it's pretty competitive in there.
Bubble houses. I tried those.
All right, hang on a second. I passed up a question. For local, on page is all that is needed for low to medium competition. What do you think, guys? Is that true or false?
That's very true, but it's not always all that's needed, because you're competing against Yelp, the end users list, and home advisors and all that stuff too. So, I mean, you can get into the top 3 with a good interlinking structure and a good on page. But again, it's also caveat, low to medium competition. This is entirely true. If there's no one in your area that's doing landscaping and you're the only one, you got low to medium competition because you're competing against all those other directories I mentioned to you. So, I mean, that's just those clowns that like to say, oh, you can rank all these pages without backlinks to get all these people hooked on SEO on page for free. And then reality comes in and kicks them in the balls because they don't have any budget to do backlinks or any knowledge to employ backlinks properly. So yeah, I'd be careful with that trap.
Let's see. Is it a good practice to link internally from a page that is in top 10 to a page that sits from a while on page 2 to get to the first page? It's little awkward phrasing. Assuming that it's relevant, will this affect the ranking page? So internal linking from a top 10 to a page 2, what are the implications and the opportunities?
There's a lot of reasons why a page, could be on page 2. It could be that your content is not, well, it could be that your backlink structure is not well. It could, there's a bunch of them, but those are the 2 broad categories of it. So if it needs a nudge, yeah, sure, a relevant internal link might be the thing that gives it the nudge to bump it up onto page 1. But if it has to do with your content is crap, no amount of those internal links is probably going to give you the result that you want. It also depends on the competitiveness of the niche. Getting from page 2 to page 1 in mesothelioma is a lot different than it is in the big bubbles. Was that the niche, Clint? Big bubbles?
Yeah, I mean, I'd take this another direction. I intentionally build my silos that way. So my supporting pages are all longer tail. The competition's easier. I get those ranked top 10, top 3. And then at the same time, I'm linking to my harder page. So it sounds like that's what he's got. He's got a keyword that is pretty easy. The page is doing well. And I had this other one that's harder. Can I pass that link juice on? And I say, I recommend that you go for it. That's how I build my silos out. So if I'm trying to rank for Dallas, the entire Dallas area, it's way easier to rank for Plano. So why not optimize, rank my Plano page and then link it to the Dallas? So now I'm passing that power on, I'm passing the relevance on, I'm passing the signal on, and it makes ranking for Dallas ultimately easier when you beat up and take over those 10 little suburbs or neighborhoods or however you want to build that silo structure out.
Yeah, and I can confirm that internal linking does have powerful effects. Back in the days when PageRank was published in the Google toolbar, was working for an online retailer that was a high PageRank 7, low PageRank 8. Now it's at about 12 million backlinks. And when I would create a site-wide footer link to a single product page, that single product page would shoot up in the rankings. Like, it was a power tool, being able to focus that authority lens on a single target. And so it totally works. And the more authority you have to leverage, the more advantage you have. So if you have an authority website, then this type of internal linking can be very powerful. Let's see, if you were to force Google to change search intent, forcing Google to see local keyword as a brand search, how would you go about this? I don't know that I can force Google to do anything, but trying to change a local keyword to a brand keyword. So let's say your brand is Seattle Tacos is the name of your store, and it's a nationwide franchise. So we have a Seattle Tacos in Plano, Texas. What do we do? Any ideas?
I think the best you could probably hope for would be mixed intent. So if optimized properly, the brand would probably kick in there, but ultimately you're going to have other taco stands mixed in there at the same time. So, but I would do that with CTR. After the optimization's done, I would just put a little bit of CTR in there and try to, refine that, the connection, the Plano, Texas, Central Seattle. What did you say? Seattle Tacos or something?
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah, just keep searching and then you don't have to get crazy with it. Just get some CTR so that Google knows, hey, this is what people are looking for, and keep that on for a little bit. And ultimately, you could also do that with some of the citations. If assuming you're doing citations on those two, find the ones that are ranking already, put your citation on those sites and flip it over to get those directory pages specifically for your listing. That would be how I'd handle that.
And if it's a national brand and not a local franchise business or something, you can probably look at other, even publicly traded companies or large companies and see what they're doing. Seattle's Best Coffee, for example, would be one that you could probably look at and see how they're handling the situation. What do you think, Lee?
It's interesting in terms of the, how do you take over a brand? Like if I was in Seattle and I just wanted to own the phrase Seattle Tacos, I would do a lot of the techniques that Clint, and there's some other things that you might do to power it up. But one of the things that's interesting is the premise of the question is looking at, search intent. I'm of the opinion that search intent does not exist. I think that what we classify as search intent is actually just signals that we process as human beings looking at data that is actually driven by other factors. So, I'm in the minority on that. I hear a lot of discussions about search intent, and based on, the testing and research that I've done, I don't think it exists. So that was my reaction to the question.
Well, I think it exists in local for sure. Like you go into Google Maps and you search for, best electrician. What you get is a localized search for electrician that's sorted by average, review rating. It turns that word best into a search faceted navigation. So I think in local intent is probably a real thing with more measurable effects. It's harder to argue in national organic web search.
I'd also like to add is don't think of search intent as a stagnant thing. With CTR and all the testing that Lee's done in CTR, The one thing that I took out of that is CTR is shaping the user intent for the search query. So if you're the one site that's offering something different and it just so happens that the users start looking for that one site, it's going to change the intent for that keyword. It's not a stagnant, it's always going to be this thing. It evolves with what the users are doing and how they're teaching the algorithm. Which is probably where these, I don't want to speak for Lee, but the whole tap dancing description of why he didn't think user intent was a thing.
Well, I mean, you take
I was like,
something.
it's like,
You take
user intent's not a thing because it does, the data is doing this and this and this and this. I mean, that's the plain English version is that the data is probably, in my opinion, going to be the CTR, and that CTR and it was driving the types of pages that they're showing in the results, which is why you can go to some topics and see completely different users and user intents on the page because Google's still trying to figure out what people are actually looking for.
Yeah, a follow-up question is why wouldn't Google make it a high priority to understand the query? And they do, but many of those things that Google develops to understand the query have absolutely nothing to do with the content you've put on your page. For example, when they use natural language processing on long tail searches, like what are the animals at the top of the food chain called? And they figure out that, oh, the answer to that question is apex predator. So we can show the results for a search for apex predator. That's got a lot of value to Google because Google can take a long tail search they've never seen before and canonicalize it to a search they already have in cache and can deliver very cost effectively and quickly. But that has almost nothing to do with what you have on page. So
Yeah. Oh, go ahead. Keep going.
I was going to say that you have to kind of separate, what should I tune on my page from, how does Google handle what gets typed into the search box? They don't always connect the way you think they do.
Right. I think an example of this is people in looking at a lot of the discussions across SEO groups about intent. There is sort of an underlying hypothesis that Google has multiple algorithms that are so smart that it kind of reads and understands and makes intuitive human connections between concepts to deliver those results. In my experience, if you take the fact that a page that is done entirely in lorem ipsum and some other keywords and other things on the page can rank, clearly that's not true. So what is it about that page that is satisfying intent? The satisfying intent is matching the query to the words, the topics, the concepts on the page, whether they're done in a well-written content form or lorem ipsum. So if you look at best plumber, the pages that are going to come up are going to have best, top, and those sort of synonyms, plumber, plumbing, those sort of synonyms in there. And yes, they will be localized, but the localized then presents, here's the series of websites from which we will pull best and plumber, and they could be done in freaking lorem ipsum. So for me, the concept of search intent, it's more matching the words of the query to the content on the page than it is understanding what the user is trying to search for. I don't buy it.
All right, let's see. How are we doing on time? We're at an hour. Let's do one more question, and then we can always do more questions next week. Regarding the question about the 3-pack for key, not sure I understand that. Regarding the question about the 3-pack for keyword without the 3-pack result. Don't understand that one.
That's the brand hijacking, like Seattle Taco making a 1-pack rather than a 3-pack, I think.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, yeah, let's pick that up next week if you don't work it out. But as always, great round of questions. I love how lively it was. So if you guys have more questions, let's do it again next week. I love these types of episodes where we can try to help people and get a good range of topics. I'll give Clint the final word. Anything going on at SIA we should know about?
Not this week.
Not this week.
Nope.
Should people know about SIA?
I mean, I guess if they want to know about it.
What is it? Where can they learn about it?
SEOintel.com. We're publishing. We got a news features going on. Four articles a day, typically what comes out. The staff's doing really great with that. You can kind of follow along that process. And then successfully, we got the AMAs going that we didn't have before. So every Monday at 10 a.m. Arizona time, AMAs, you can come in regardless of what you want to talk about and ask questions, get your questions answered, get help with your sites, etc. So I think that's been a good value add for the members.
Excellent. So with that, I want to thank everyone. Sorry if we didn't get to your question. We tried to get to a lot of them. Feel free to ask it again next week, and we'll try to get to